Hi, welcome back. We've had a bit of a break. I've just had a knee reconstruction done, so we're back now. Got another 5 to go, so some exciting topics still to talk about. What we're going to talk about today is our base core topic, I guess, is about feed efficiency and its benefits. Now, I'll try and keep this one a bit briefer. We've been doing some long ones, and thanks for all those comments that have come in, and I think there's been some really interesting discussions going on as we've gone through those topics. So this is about feed efficiency. I wanted to start, as we usually do, this is all connected to commercial production. Commercial beef producers is the core of everything. So let's go way back, certainly in Australia, as far as the history of feed efficiency. And say about, 30 years ago, there was a research project that was done looking at the value of growth in the beef industry. And what they did was quickly set up a genetic trial to look at the implications of selecting for growth. And so they created a line of cattle that were selected for positive growth and a line of cattle that were selected for negative growth. The low line cattle were what came out of that low growth line of cattle. And but that trial went on for quite a long period of time, 15 years. And what they looked at was what happens if you select for growth, what's the implications of that. We won't go into that, but one thing they did do was decide that they had these higher growth cattle and lower growth cattle. They wanted to look into the part behind that. How much feed was the bigger cow eating compared to the little cow in relation to how much calf she was weaning. So they built a facility to record the intakes of a cow right through her production year. What came out of that was that the higher growth animals were more efficient than the low growth animals. It wasn't like you could run 2 little cows and wean 2 200 kilogram calves and they ate the same amount of food as one big cow, but she only weaned a 300 kilogram calf. So you were getting 400 compared to 300. But if they ate the same, then you'd be going for the smaller ones. It definitely wasn't that way. In fact, the higher growth animals are more efficient at converting their feed, and over time the low growth animals got progressively slower at growth and worse at conversion because you were selecting for a whole lot of traits that weren't just about growth, I think. So anyway, that research gave us a bit of a picture about feed efficiency, and that, oh, this is interesting. There's cattle that are good converters and cattle that are bad converters. Let's have a look at that. All the researchers thought at that time. So then they designed a similar project to look at feed efficiency. If we have a group of animals that are selected for feed efficiency in a positive way and ones that are selected in a negative way, what's the difference between those two populations? So that research found some basic stuff. This is 25, 30 years ago that this research was done. It found out that there was a range within the population within Australia. So there's good converting animals and there's poor converting animals. They also found that feed efficiency as a genetic trait was heritable. So if you chose to try and select for it over time, you would shift the average of the population. A heritable trait, the more heritable is, the more change you can make over time. So they established the heritability. They also looked, it's no use improving feed efficiency if high feed converting animals are going to be bad for other traits, which affects commercial production. That research showed there really wasn't anything that was strongly correlated with feed efficiency that was going to cause any production loss. They also looked into the part of going, what genes in those high efficiency cattle made them more efficient. It's not like there was just one gene that was for feed efficiency. It established that there was like 100, 120, and as we go along we realise there's even more. So there's genes about particular elements in the blood and the ability of the gut to process protein and energy, and things about temperature control and stuff about how much movement the animals have and how well they control their temperature, and there's just an enormous amount of stuff in the physiology and the animals and in the basic makeup of those animals. So that was really interesting to find there's 120 different genes that are all coming together to influence how well those animals convert. So then they wanted to have a look and say, well, you know, if we've got these more efficient animals, are they more profitable over time? And that research was done, and it was shown that those high feed converting animals were significantly more profitable, basically because it didn't change how much money they made. It just changed how much the animals were consuming. It reduced the input costs, which were very dramatic. So here we are 25 years down the track, having established all that, and not much has changed really. When you think about it, that there's a few studs in Australia that have been selecting for feed efficiency. Some of the big corporate herds have been doing it for a while. There's some Angus herds that are doing it now, which is fantastic, but not many. So here we are at this point of going, we know all this stuff about feed efficiency, but not much has been adopted. And you know, there's some theories about that, but what we do know, the only way that our industry can incorporate feed efficiency into the genetics of the commercial industry is that the seed stock industry does that testing. And up until now, the seed stock industry has chosen not to do that testing in any large scale. Now, why that is another whole topic. But you know, it's expensive, relatively expensive for seed stock producers to be doing that testing. Here's the facility behind us. We know it's not cheap, but you know, it's not that expensive either, and the differences in profitability and what comes with that are enormous. So we know, we've talked about the history, and we've talked about how that's taken us through into that spot about feed efficiency adding to profitability for commercial producers. So, you know, I think that's established. We've got a new era coming now, which is about, we're starting to understand the relationship between methane and intake. We know that's directly correlated. The more an animal eats, the more methane they produce. Now that's a big topic, and we're not going to go into that area now, because that's another whole discussion we can have. But it does open up a new area for feed efficiency in how can that contribute, and how can the seed stock industry, because they're the only ones that can change feed efficiency over time, how can the seed stock industry start to contribute to the story that the beef industry needs to build about how we're taking responsibility for our emissions. Now we know there's lots of ways that we can do that. One of them is genetics and feed efficiency. In the talk that we'll do in a few weeks' time, we'll go into that in a whole lot more detail. Just to finish off, I know it's a really, if there's one question about feed efficiency that I've been asked a million times, is when we do the testing for feed efficiency in this facility, are we breeding animals that'll be more efficient out in the paddock? So I wish I had the answer, and if there was a way that I knew we were selecting for feed efficiency on grass, I'd be doing it now. Unfortunately, we don't have that knowledge and don't have the technology to do that. We talked earlier on about the number of genes that influence feed efficiency. We know there's hundreds of genes. My suggestion in the space is that the animals that we identify as being more efficient in this facility, to think that there are a completely different set of genes that make an animal efficient out on grass. These animals here are consuming protein, carbohydrates, fats, lipids, vitamins, minerals. The animals out on grass are consuming proteins, carbohydrates, fats, lipids, vitamins and minerals. So it's the gut's ability to react to that diet and use all those particular genetic features within it to be a better converter. And so I am convinced that we are selecting for something that's beneficial out in the paddock. But again, we need more research to be done, and we need to get on with solving that picture and helping us understand, because that helps us understand how we can reduce the amount of methane that our animals are producing out in the paddock. Anyway, thanks very much. That's the end of it today. We'll be covering some more topics over the next few weeks. We'll see you then.